That wasn't a very fun wild card weekend. I don't know about you, man, but these games kind of sucked, bro. Like, they sucked. Welcome, football fans, to your NFL wild card weekend reaction. Gronk, spike the like button, and if you haven't already, don't be a jabroni and subscribe to the channel. In this video, I'm going to go game by game and discuss my thoughts on each of the wild card weekend games. I'm not going to spend as much time going into the minutia of the scheme and the highlight plays. Every other show does that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring you what the bottom line view does best. And that is a little rant about each game. From the hip, we're shooting. All right? So if that sounds good, Gronk, spike the like button. Let's start it off with last night. The Los Angeles Rams, as the home team, but not at home, actually in Arizona, they played phenomenal. Phenomenal. The Los Angeles Rams all of a sudden are looking like a legitimate dark horse. Now they have a much tougher test coming next week. But man, my brain is all over the place when it comes to this football game. The Rams won it 27-9 in dominant fashion in a neutral site game. This wasn't even at home. And at exclamation points, my point about the Minnesota Vikings sucking on the road. They couldn't even be competitive in a neutral site game. What? I'm sorry, Sarah. I really am. Your team sucks. And honestly, I don't know why anyone would have believed in Sam Darnold after what I watched in Week 18. I was absolutely disgusted by Darnold in Week 18. I was throwing up in my mouth watching him play football. It was the grossest thing I've ever seen. So going into this game, I didn't have very high expectations for Sam Darnold after his display in Detroit. But I would argue that his play against the Rams was even worse. I didn't think it could get any worse, bro. This guy got sacked not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5 times, not 6, not 7. I know it's a lot. 8, 9 times, bro. 9? Now, your offensive line could literally be the New England Patriots of 2024, and you shouldn't get sacked 9 times. In fact, I don't think Drake May got sacked more than 4 times all year. Sam Darnold, you absolute jabroni. Stop holding on to the damn ball, Darnold. This was me every single drop back of the damn game. Throw the ball. It is really my pet peeve, guys, because I spent most of my football viewing time watching Tom Brady. So I guess I'm a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to watching the quarterback position. But I don't know how many plays I used to see Tom Brady just throw the ball at the legs of a player, not even trying to complete the pass, just so he would avoid a sack. Where is this lost art? It feels like the only one that does this is Patrick Mahomes and maybe Jared Goff. Stafford's decent at it as well. But honestly, the difference between these teams was the quarterback. I've never seen such a big discrepancy. You know, you could give credit to Sean McVay for definitely having a beat on his Padawan Kevin O'Connell. But at the end of the day, I know that Stafford's numbers weren't outrageous against the Vikings, but the difference between these teams was the quarterback. If you switch the quarterbacks on these teams, I have no question in my mind. That's how bad Sam Darnold was. Sam Darnold wasn't even replacement level. He was barely backup level. He was horrible. He was throwing the ball behind receivers. He was off time. He was getting sacked, taking numerous terrible, atrocious sacks. He was seeing ghosts. Oh, there's Casper. I got to throw it. He wouldn't even throw it. He'd just take the damn sack. I'm surprised he didn't just fall over one time because there was a ghost coming. Like, bro. This was a tough game to watch. I really want to praise the Rams, but I really can't get over Sam Darnold and how bad this guy was. Like, I really can't get over it. That's what I was talking about with Detroit. And I think retroactively, Lions fans were watching last night's game and they're like, okay, I know that we played really well last week and our defense really showed up, especially in the red zone, but man, this guy sucks. Like, how as a Lions fan can you be sitting here more confident after watching that game? If the Vikings would have won, you might have been saying, we got something defensively. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Lions defense comes back down to earth in divisional round in the NFC Championship game, because Sam Darnold really is just making any defense look like the 2008 Steelers. Like, come on, this pass rush is not that good. Like, they're good. They're not that good. I knew this was part of the reason I picked the Rams. I knew that their front would give the Vikings offensive line problems. I knew that the Vikings were not a very good running team, and they didn't run the ball in the first matchup against the Rams particularly well, which would force Sam Darnold to throw the ball, which was why I liked the Rams to win the game, because I thought if Stafford's throwing it at a high rate early in this game, which he was being effective. They especially went to play action quite often pretty early in the game. They were able to move the ball. They had a solid amount of balance with Kyren Williams. They were able to close the game out with Kyren Williams late with 76 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. But this honestly, like, from a Rams offensive point of view, I actually thought the Tyler Higbees, the Colby Parkinsons, the Demarcus Robinsons, the Davis Allens, they all contributed in this game. I thought Mcvay did a good job getting Higbee involved in particular. Hopefully he's good to go next week. I thought he did get injured at one point in the game, and that slowed him up maybe a little bit. Cooper Kupp is close to invisible. Like, he's not really a big part of this offense. Puka is the guy, but the Vikings did a decent job at trying to take him away. And ultimately, it came down to the Rams having a dominant defensive performance. The stats are going to say what they say. I mean, 269 yards is not exactly great from the Vikings' point of view, but they did have 20 first downs. Now, I think a lot of that came in the fourth quarter. So, like the Rams also had 10 penalties for 95 yards, and they still won this game running away. The game was never really that close. The Rams went up 10-0 in the first quarter. It was never close. 10-3. And there was a couple big plays, a fumble for 6 by Darnold, a near fumble for 6 by Stafford, which was actually an underhanded pass, and I think the correct call. But I thought the Rams, they controlled the game offensively as best they could. They were playing a good defense in Minnesota. They only ultimately allowed 20 points of offense from the Rams, okay, in a dome, in a neutral-sided game. And maybe the Rams took their foot off the gas in the fourth quarter, but they only scored 3 points in the third quarter. So they scored, 17 offensive points in the first half. But that can be expected at times with this type of matchup. We looked at Stafford, we looked at Mcvay, and we looked at this offense as a tough matchup for the Vikings defense because of their quick ability to get the ball out, Stafford's ability to manage pressure, the blitz, all that sort of stuff, the inability to maybe man up on Puka Nacua. I thought the Rams were a really difficult matchup for the Vikings, and ultimately the Vikings only lost to 2 teams this season. They lost to the Lions twice, and they lost to the Rams twice. It's kind of a tough way to go out, but those last 2 games, I don't want to see any more of Minnesota. I don't want to see any more Sam Darnold. And we've got to talk about Justin Jefferson. I mean, this guy, completely invisible, didn't do much at all. This is supposed to be the best receiver in the league, or at least one of the two best receivers in the league. And the last two games, two of the biggest games of his career, he's completely invisible. I can't even really say that the Vikings receivers did a lot to help Sam Darnold in this game. I want to blame everything on Sam Darnold, but at the same time, they don't have a running game. Their O-line is leaky. Their receivers are not separating at the rate you would expect by Addison and Jefferson against mediocre to bad secondaries. They're playing the Lions secondary, who made Ricky Pearsall look like 2009 Wes Welker. And then you're playing the Rams secondary, which might be the slowest secondary in football that really doesn't want to play a lick of man coverage. And there were routes where they're getting bumped off their route. They're getting out-physicaled. It just felt like the Vikings didn't want to be there. They had the Honolulu Blue Flu. That's what they had, man. That's what it felt like. It felt like, man, we got no shot. After losing the Lions, they completely were decimated psychologically. I can't even really say that the Vikings on offense, I don't think a single player played well. Hawkinson was okay, I guess. He had 5 catches and 64 yards and a touchdown. This was a tough game to watch. I was expecting a close game. I'm just disappointed I didn't bet on the Rams. I didn't bet on the Vikings either. And I'm just disappointed I didn't put money on it. So let's move back to Sunday. We had the Commanders and the Buccaneers, a game that I didn't stream. The only game of the bunch that I didn't stream this weekend. 23-20 for the Commanders. This was the best game of the weekend by a long shot. This was the best game. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that we've got, 2 punts in the entire game, both by the Buccaneers. 0 punts by the Commanders. And because of that fact and that fact alone, I can't deny that the Washington Commanders deserved to win. They had 22 first downs in the game. They controlled the possession 35-24. And I thought what gave them the edge was their early game plan defensively. And I don't think a lot of casual NFL fans would have picked up on this. They really were closing the space in the run game. I thought their D-line did a great job at setting the edge. I thought their D-line did a great job of slowing down Bucky Irving early, and they really stacked the box. And I thought it took a while for the Bucs to kind of digest the fact that they just needed to throw the ball. And that just change up by Dan Quinn to have a very much loaded box, take away the run, Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen inside doing a great job, and then Payne went out later, which allowed Bucky Irving to kind of start to hit some of those big runs. That was influential in how the game was played. It was influential in how the game began. I thought Washington's defensive game plan, although they didn't play great defense, just the way they played was important, in my opinion. Okay? Now, Jayden Daniels is the headliner. Jayden Daniels had a great game. I would say, a lot with his legs. I thought his legs were influential in this game. The ability to pick up 4 or 5 yards on first or second down. The ability to avoid third down and long against Todd Bowles' blitzing defense. The ability of the Commanders, I thought they won the matchups on the outside. Daniels played really well. He made a lot of throws. He made a couple deep balls to Terry McLaurin. He hit, Zach Ertz in some big spots. Zaccheaus. He was very patient, very poised, great at escaping pressure, rolling to his right, making plays. Daniels played fantastic overall. But I actually felt like maybe the thing that I didn't account for as much as I should have was the Commanders' weaponry actually winning their matchups. McLaurin had a big game, 7 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. Zach Ertz, Zaccheaus, right? Austin Eckler, all these other guys making a couple plays throughout the course of the game, just enough. and Daniels using his legs on top of his arm to attack this defense and keep them out of bad situations. That being said, Baker Mayfield also played very well. He had 15 completions on 18 attempts. I think he was the first quarterback ever to have an 80% completion percentage and 2 touchdowns in a playoff game and lose. Now, he only had 185 yards, and that spoke to the game plan by the Bucs. I thought they were too run-heavy and not enough passing the ball. Once they went to more passing down the stretch, they were nearly unstoppable. The only way that the Commanders were stopping the Bucs in the second half was due to the Bucs messing up a fumble in their own end, which allowed the Commanders to capitalize for a touchdown, which I think was the biggest play of the game. If that doesn't happen, the Bucs had possession up a score already, right? At that point in the game, it was 17-13, I want to say. Or was it, what was the score? Hold on a second. So it was 10-3 Commanders, 10-10 at halftime. Then it was 13-10. Then it was 17-13 Bucs late in the third quarter. Then the fumble happened. So the Bucs get a stop at some point, I believe. It must have been on a fourth down because the Commanders went for it twice on fourth down. And Daniels, incomplete in the back of the end zone. I think he was trying to find Zach Ertz. Can't quite recall, but I think he was trying to find Zach Ertz. Regardless, it was good defense in the red zone by the Bucs. They made a couple fourth down stops in the game, which was critical. But they got the ball, and they botch a handoff. They botch, a McMillan, I believe, reverse or something, jet sweep. That results in a fumble. And then later in the game, on the potential game-winning drive, on 2nd and 1, they have the ball 2nd and 1 inside the 20-yard line of the Commanders, and they botch, one of their run plays that totally destroys that drive. So, and that was terribly managed. If there is anything against Liam Cohen, it's that execution in those moments for the Bucs. As well as the Commanders played, as much as they controlled the pace of play, if that fumble doesn't happen by Tampa Bay, the Bucs probably go on to win the game because I don't think they're getting stopped. If the Bucs go up by 2 scores, if either team goes up by 2 scores in the second half in this game, the game's over because the offense is going to score, right? It's just going to keep on flowing. So that was so big and a little fluky. The Commanders there was a lot of calls in this game. There was a lot of big penalties, I thought, that were influential. 7 penalties on the Bucs for 65 yards. I thought the Commanders got the better side of the refs here. And the Commanders had 5 calls, 5 penalties for 39 yards. There seemed to be more penalties in this game from the games that we saw previously in Sunday and Saturday. And it didn't help that it was on prime time. The run game for the Commanders wasn't very successful outside of Jayden Daniels, right? They only had 82 total yards. Eckler had 27 of those yards. Robinson really did nothing at all. They were 8 for 15 on third down were the Commanders. They faced 15 third downs, which is what was so excruciating to watch as somebody that was cheering for the Bucs to win, was seeing the Commanders consistently get to third down, but their ability to manage first and second, particularly Jayden Daniels' ability to manage first and second, and a great called game by Cliff Kingsbury. An expertly called game by Cliff Kingsbury to get good yards on first and second down. Right? Give him a lot of credit. Dan Quinn's getting a lot of love, a lot of credit. Cliff deserves a lot of love and a lot of credit for that game plan. 22 first downs in the game. I thought that the first and second down success was huge, and the Commanders were slightly better in that asset. But, the Bucs were also 5 for 9 on third down. Mike Evans was absolutely unbelievable. He had 7 targets, 7 catches. Every time Baker threw him the ball, remember, Baker only had 15 completions. Half his completions were to Mike Evans. Almost half. 7 for 7, 92 yards and a touchdown. He was abusing Lattimore in this game. Absolutely abusing him. He scored a beautiful touchdown on a fake fade slant route. Had a couple deep posts and slants within the game where he was just wrecking Lattimore. That was a lot of fun to watch. I thought Bucky played overall pretty well, but not one of his better games. I thought McMillan really struggled and honestly choked in this game. The O-line of the Bucs, I thought, struggled a little bit more than I would have expected in the run in the pass game, and I thought that was huge. Gonzalez, played a good game from the kicker perspective. Both kickers played well, but Gonzalez hit a 52-yarder early. He hit the game winner off the post, the doink and the in, which was also kind of lucky from the Commanders' perspective. So you need a little luck to be good. You needed a little luck to advance. But as the underdog, you often need that. The Commanders, I think, deserve to win this game. I think that they deserve to move on. I thought the Bucs botched this game. Todd Bowles, honestly, bro, if I was the Buccaneers, I would be nervous about continuing with Todd Bowles as my head coach. His defense, once again, got lit up in a big game. His defense struggled all season. The defense is getting older. A lot of the core pieces on this team are getting older. I'd look to go with the young coach, the young vibe, Liam Cohen, keep the continuity of the offense together. That's the best hope moving forward. I really would fire Todd Bowles. I mean, he's not a bad coach. He's a good defensive coordinator typically, and I thought that some of his blitzes were extremely creative. If facing a different quarterback, I thought he would have brought that quarterback down numerous times given the pass protection, but they couldn't corral and they couldn't handle Daniels in this game. They struggled with his lateral agility. They struggled with his, escapability and his ability to be elusive. And they struggled with Terry McLaurin. Jamel Dean went down and McCollum went down, which didn't help the odds in the end. This is one of those games where I felt like the underdog played the better, cleaner game and they won, but they're not necessarily the better team, if that makes sense. I feel like the Bucs would have had better odds moving forward, but because of how they hurt themselves in this game, they jeopardized their future and they lost. That's kind of my takeaway from this game. I thought both quarterbacks played really well, which is what resulted in a good game overall. And I just thought the Bucs kind of got out coached and they just made too many mistakes, penalties and turnovers included. And I loved the boldness by the Commanders. That's something that I can't leave out. Going for 5 fourth downs and getting 3 of them was ultimately the right decision. Being aggressive from the very beginning, understanding that you are the underdog and understanding that the best way to win this game from Dan Quinn's perspective, at looking at a 3-phase game, and this is how you have a good head coach, is can he see how the game should be played for us to win? Can he see the pace of play? Can he see what he needs to do, the decisions he needs to make? Not necessarily the plays he needs to call, but the decisions he needs to make that allows us to win. And they went for 5 fourth downs and they got 3 of them. Okay, and that was ultimately huge in the game. Huge, right? And I think one of them was for a touchdown, if I'm not mistaken, maybe even multiple, but one of them was definitely for a touchdown. So, yeah, give the Commanders a lot of credit for how they coached this game, for how Daniels played, for how well their offense orchestrated, and defensively, I thought they came out with a good game plan, but it wasn't necessarily executed to perfection, but they were playing a top 5 offense in the league. And the score was a little deceptive from the point of it looked lower scoring than the game felt, right? The Commanders did not punt. Remember, they did get stopped twice, but they did not punt. The Bucs only punted twice, right? That's typically a game that's more so 38-34. That's how the game felt. But the score was 23-20 because of the way the Commanders orchestrated the game, the way they controlled it. So that's my takeaway. That was a very interesting game that deserved kind of more of a nuanced discussion. And you guys let me know what you thought on that one. I'm kind of upset that the Commanders won just because I don't think they stand much of a chance against Detroit. And I thought that the Bucs matched up well with the Eagles. But hopefully the Rams can give the Eagles a game, and we'll see if the Commanders are able to make it fun against Detroit. I don't think anyone expects them to win, but making it fun would be great. Okay? The Philadelphia Eagles, speaking of them, beat the Packers 22-10. This is a rant-worthy game. This was one of the worst, least fun games I've seen in the playoffs. I mean, this was one of the worst played football games. 17 first downs for Green Bay, 16 for Philadelphia. Philadelphia was 2 for 11 on third down. Meanwhile, the Packers did nothing on early downs. They faced 13 third downs. They were 7 for 13, but 1 for 2 on fourth. This game was over from the opening kickoff, in my opinion. As soon as the Packers fumbled the opening kickoff, I'm like, oh, there it is. That's over. Because the Packers' whole identity from late last season to this season, Matt LaFleur is quite predictable in this manner, but he's been very effective at it. They're going to take the ball, and as Matt Hasselbeck once said, they're going to score. That's what they do. They take the ball early, they get the lead, and they play on their terms. If they're not able to do that, they lose. That's pretty much what we've seen all year. That's pretty much what we've seen all last year. They get the ball, they're going to score, and then from there, you're in trouble. If they don't score, the Packers might be in trouble because now Jordan Love's got to drop back a bunch of times. He's got to be actually playing a drop back passing game. The receivers actually have to make plays. And this was one of the wildest games from the perspective of I've never seen a one position in a playoff game get so injured. Like Christian Watson was already out. Then Romeo Doubs gets hurt. Jayden Reed gets hurt. Just felt like everyone was getting hurt at wide receiver for the Packers. That did not help. I thought that the Eagles, yes, won by 12 points, won by double digits, but it was not an extremely impressive performance from an eye test perspective. Their defense played well, which I expected. They got some pressure. They stopped the run well enough. You know, Jacobs only had 81 yards on 18 carries, which is 4.5 yards per carry, but not an overall dynamic day by one of the best rushing attacks in the league. And the secondary, as we thought, dominated. The secondary of Philadelphia dominated, and they stole the show. Darius Slay's interception was beautiful. Jordan Love, 3 picks in this game. And I could argue that he wasn't even that much worse than Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts was terrible, I thought, for a majority of this game. Wasn't seeing guys open, had no answers to the test of the blitz. You know, just seemed kind of like last year's Jalen Hurts. He steered the ship, 131 yards and 2 touchdowns, statistically speaking. But if you actually watched him, it wasn't a showcase of great quarterback play. It certainly wasn't. Saquon Barkley had some great runs later in the game, but honestly, overall was kind of held to about as good of a bad of a game, I could say, as you would have expected. Like the Packers held him to 119 yards total, but it felt like a lot of times, they were getting stops on first and second down to put the Eagles in bad third down or long second down plays. The Eagles also had 7 penalties. The Packers had 8. Yeah, this was a tough game to watch. I thought both quarterbacks were pathetic. I thought that the Eagles, from an offensive standpoint, felt like they didn't even have a game plan. It felt like they came up with nothing throughout the week. That Dallas Goedert touchdown was cool, but the Packers, they just didn't have enough receiver talent out there. Love was pretty bad. He made some terrible decisions. He made some bad throws. My love is fading for Jordan Love. That's certainly the case. And you could ultimately say that this game was Love Hurts. Bro. I don't know. The Eagles defense looked legit, which we knew. But at the same time, I wasn't blown away by this performance at all. I actually came away more depressed about picking the Eagles to not win the Super Bowl, but go to the Super Bowl than I was previously. Even though they won the game by 12 and they covered and they won me money. This is one of the least encouraging performances I've ever seen by a team that won me money in my entire life. Because the offense was just so sluggish, so slow, so meh. I wanted to throw up watching Jalen Hurts drop back and throw. A.J. Brown's reading a book on the sidelines. Why can't we get A.J. Brown the ball, bro? Send him to New England. Matt LaFleur was losing his shit for half the game. I just felt like the Eagles never were going to lose this game. They were in control the entire time, mostly because their defense. I never had faith the Packers were going to drive the ball and score. And their receivers and their quarterback could not consistently move the ball. That's all I got to say. On Sunday, we had the early game, 31-7 Buffalo beat down the Broncos. This game started off pretty interestingly. You know, the Broncos hit a deep ball to Troy Franklin, the first rookie-to-rookie touchdown in the history of the playoffs, which is pretty crazy. I didn't even know that. But this game kind of started the way I thought it would. Like, I thought it would start competitively. I thought the Bills might come out a little slow and the Broncos would come out fast just because of the Sean Payton factor and the script and all that sort of stuff. And the Bills defense maybe not being exactly tuned in right away. But as the game continued to unwind and the Bills started to wear down the Bronco defense and their time of possession started to take hold, the Bills just proved that they were ultimately the far superior, different level team, and the Broncos just couldn't keep up. But what was most impressive, in my opinion, was the Bills' defense in this game had arguably the best performance of any defense this weekend, and I think they've been one of the most questioned units entering the playoffs, right? The Broncos, yes, you know, people will remember that opening drive and maybe that possession right before halftime where they missed a field goal, so maybe they could have had 10 points here. But they only ended up with 13 first downs in a game in which they had plenty of time to get garbage first downs and garbage yards. They only had 224 yards. They were 2 for 9 on third down. They were 1 for 3 on fourth down. They really struggled. After the first drive, like, they really struggled to move the ball at all. The run game was non-existent, 79 yards on the ground. I mean, Javonte Williams barely did anything. McLaughlin wasn't involved enough, in my opinion. Nix only had 144 yards. The most effective offense in this game for the Broncos was Bo Nix running. That was their most effective offense. And then occasionally a Courtland Sutton play. Like, Courtland Sutton's a really good football player. He's going to make some plays. And I've really, you know, come around back on Courtland Sutton, where I think this year he's really proven his value. But ultimately, I mean, you look at the stat sheet, like 31-7 maybe doesn't even do it justice for like how dominant Buffalo was. Like 26 first downs to 13. That's double. 8 for 15 on third down, 2 for 2 on fourth down, including one of the plays of the year to Ty Johnson on fourth down and 1. Josh Allen scrambles to his right and throws a laser, and Ty Johnson, a running back, makes a toe tap catch in the back of the end zone, falling down. Incredible play. They had 471 yards. They had 210 rushing and 261 passing, which, by the way, 210 rushing yards against the Broncos, that's different. Like, I didn't think that the Broncos were going to allow that. I didn't think the Bills were going to be able to do that more generally. If we look up the Bills, this season, they had 210 rushing yards, which was their best performance of the season besides the snow game against the Niners. Right? They also had 197 against Detroit too, but I think a lot of those were Josh Allen. 471 total yards is insane. The best pass rush in football, according to sacks and pressure rate for Denver, was held to only 2 sacks. And ultimately, they really didn't get a lot of pressure on Josh Allen. I thought the O-line of the Bills played really, really well. I thought Josh did a great job managing this game. I thought this game was evidence of Josh's evolution as both a passer and a manager of the game. He had a 135 passer rating, 20 for 26, 272, and 2 touchdowns, and he never put the ball in harm's way at all. And I thought that this was a brilliant game plan from Buffalo. Early on, I was a little bit worried about it, but as the game went on, the decision for the Bills to play a really drawn out style. The Broncos were forcing the Bills to beat them with many plays on a drive. They weren't allowing a lot of explosives until later. But early in the game, the Bills were opening up the Broncos for what would happen later in the game when the Broncos would get a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more dicey, and Allen made them pay with a Curtis Samuel 55-yard touchdown or a Ty Johnson, the Ty Johnson play. Later in the game, it opened up for Buffalo to really run away with this game with some explosives down the field. But early on in the game, Buffalo did a great job of just taking what was there, running it, throwing it, screening it, whatever they needed to do. Joe Brady did a great job calling plays, and Josh Allen went out there and executed, and Khalil Shakir had a good game. I thought Curtis Samuel, all the weapons kind of showed up. Kincaid, I thought, had a really good game. James Cook, obviously, 120 yards, 5.2 yards per carry and a touchdown. 41 minutes of possession to 18. The Broncos wanted to come into this game exactly how they played it last year. Possess the ball and forced the Bills to drive the ball. And the Bills showed their evolution. This is why I like the Bills this year. They showed their evolution. They showed their ability to drive the ball with consistency and balance. Josh showed an ability to not throw the ball in harm's way and make magical plays nonetheless. And the defense said, enough of that. We're not allowing you to drive the field. And I thought their linebackers played phenomenal. Matt Milano and Bernard, great game from both of those guys. So Buffalo wins 31-7. Very impressive performance. I thought it was probably the most impressive performance overall of the entire weekend. I talked about the Ravens and the Steelers in a Mike Tomlin rant. I almost don't really want to talk about it, okay? Because I already talked about it. You know, just to throw on a little bit of Ravens flavor here, Lamar played a very effective and efficient game with 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, 16 for 21, 132 passer rating. Pretty much did what he wanted when he wanted. But the show and the MVP of this game was Derrick Henry, 26 carries, 186 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 7.2 yards per carry. That is kind of part of my reasoning to why I would have picked Josh Allen as MVP, because Derrick Henry is capable of this. 186 yards, 7.2 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns against one of the better front sevens in the league. You know, Baltimore had 29 first downs without Zay Flowers, 464 yards without Zay Flowers, and they went 10 for 15 on third down without Zay Flowers. Now, looking back at it, the Steelers look like the worst team in the playoffs. The score was only 28-14, but it was over before it even started. Russell Wilson, you know, had actually a pretty good game statistically. And I thought, like, the game plan by Arthur Smith made a lot of sense. Like, a lot of quick throws. They weren't going to be able to run the ball, but it just lacked execution. You know, that's not really Russ's style of play. They made some explosives later on. But really the problem with this game, I thought, for the Steelers was their defense did not live up to the billing. Their defense did not come through, right? Like, I think if you would have told me Russ had 270 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 9 incompletions, Pickens had 87 yards and a touchdown. If you would have told me that before the game, and I understand a lot of that came in the second half, but if you would have told me that before the game, I would have been like, oh, that game might have been close. That game, the Steelers might have had a chance. You know, I didn't expect Russ to throw for 270 against this defense the way they're playing. And that's where I lead into next week and I say, I think the Ravens defense is a little overrated, and I think the Bills defense is a little underrated. I do believe that. I do think the Ravens are a tough challenge for the Bills, in particular because of the Derrick Henry factor. But I haven't seen the Ravens play a really good offense in quite some time. So I'm intrigued by that matchup moving forward. I do think that's the Super Bowl. I think whoever wins that game is going to win the Super Bowl, personally. But I just feel like 464 yards allowed by the Steelers, 29 first downs. That was never a formula for the Steelers to win this game. So that's completely on Tomlin and his defense. And they were healthy, so there's no excuses. I know they only allowed 28, but the Ravens could have scored more if they really wanted to. But that's my thoughts on that game. 32-12, Texans over the Chargers in the shocker of the weekend. Now, a lot of people are calling this a blowout because of the score, but honestly, like, this wasn't a blowout until the fourth quarter. Like, there was a pick six by Eric Murray, which extended the lead. There was a Joe Mixon touchdown with 4 minutes left. Like, this was a blowout in the fourth quarter. But the game was, within arm's reach for much of the game. Like, halftime, it was 10-6 Houston, okay? Then the third quarter, Texans scored 10 points, one of them being a pick six. Because the game felt close because the Texans couldn't really move the ball for most of the game. But there were spots where the Texans really put together some magical offense. CJ Stroud on some scramble drill plays. I thought this was one of CJ's better games. He was 22 for 33, 282, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. The pick was pretty bad. I think it was in the end zone, actually, which was one of the better drives the Texans had, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe they just threw it back after Herbert threw one of his picks. But this game is going to be discussed with Justin Herbert with 4 interceptions. That's what it's going to be all about, a 40 passer rating, right? 14 completions on 32 attempts. Everyone's going to be talking about that. And the lack of the Chargers' ability to have a well-rounded receiving core. Well, Ladd McConkey had 197 yards and a touchdown on 9 catches, 1 really long touchdown, where he had a 86-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter, which was a large portion of his yards, about half of his yards. But I feel like a lot of it's going to be on Herbert. I didn't even realize till now that the Texans had 429 total yards. They did end up with a lot of yards in the end, running the ball from Joe Mixon, 106 at the end of the day. But if they can put together, they've shown like glimpses of this. They showed glimpses against the Chargers of like, we can piece together some drives here with some balance, with some quick passing, with some play action, right? With some Nico Collins, 7 for 122 and a touchdown. He was dominant in this game. He's going to have to be dominant next week. But the story of this game was even more so than Justin Herbert, which we'll get to him, don't worry, was the defense of the Texans, right? Like, you take out that 86-yard touchdown, the Chargers don't have 200 yards in this game. And that was like a 3rd down and 20. It was kind of a miracle play. It was, I would say, a bad defensive play call by DeMeco Ryans, in my opinion. You know, the Chargers, a team that got blown out, that was playing in garbage time, had only 15 first downs with, you know, a quarterback that's considered top 5 or 6 in the league. The Texans had 4 sacks, but it felt like they had 40. They had a ton of pressure in that game. They forced 4 picks. They had numerous 3rd downs where they forced, you know, Herbert to get hit while he was throwing the ball. They covered and they smothered the Chargers receivers. Herbert, on a lot of plays, had nowhere to go with the ball. And that's why I don't want to completely kill Justin Herbert, because I thought the Texans secondary, Lassiter and Stingley, were phenomenal. I thought the linebackers of the Texans, Harris and Al-Shaair, were great. I thought Will Anderson played absolutely lights out. Mario Edwards and Danico Autry were also fantastic. But Stroud was the much better player in this game over Herbert, despite the situational difference. And I thought Herbert just made some disgusting decisions. Now, there was a couple plays that weren't even the interceptions. Like the 4th down that the Chargers went for and they failed, where he throws a zig route on Madden, you know, where the guy goes in and then he breaks back out, right? He throws that to Quentin Johnston. And this is like, at the base level, what I despise about Justin Herbert the most. He's always lacked a level of playmaking and creativity that guys like Lamar, Mahomes, and Allen have, and Burrow. Herbert lacks that aspect, which keeps him from being elite in that category. He's not open. Like, yeah, that's the design of the play. That's where you should go with the ball. But you've got to understand a couple things. First of all, it's Quentin Johnston versus Derek Stingley. Understand the matchup. The likeliness of him winning that is not going to happen. Yes, that's what it said on the blackboard. Yes, that's what it said in your tablet. That's what Greg Roman drew up. But it's Quentin Johnston versus Derek Stingley, first of all. Second of all, when reading the play, he is open by a step, and you know that he has terrible hands. And you should understand by playing with Quentin Johnston for 2 years that he's not going to catch that pass. And then you have to talk about, well, you had a little bit of time on that play. You should have maybe extended the play or looked to your second or third option. Instead, he's dialed in on that throw. He throws it and it's incomplete. And some people will say, you know, Johnston, they need better receivers in that situation. Johnston needs to make that catch. Johnston needs to win that route. Blah, 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 blah. These guys will make excuses. But you know what would have happened if that's Josh Allen? You would have escaped the pocket, made the play a little bit longer, found a receiver, or ran. You know what would have happened if it was Patrick Mahomes? He would have ducked out of pressure. He would have waited, pump faked, probably found Kelsey over the middle for a first down. You know what would have happened if it was Lamar? He would have done a spinorama and then probably ran for a first down, right? Right after looking deep. Okay, so for me, like, Herbert is lauded as this elite player, but he lacks one thing that keeps him from being in that category. And it's understanding the moment. It's understanding when to be the playmaker, when to be Superman. He has the physical ability to do it. We've seen it in glimpses throughout the year. But he doesn't understand it well enough. This has always been something about Herbert that's drove me absolutely bonkers and nuts. He doesn't understand the moment. He doesn't understand what he has to do to win. Mahomes does, Allen does, Lamar does. I don't see it with Herbert. He is a guy that's willing to play the game within the structure too much. Too much. He doesn't have that creativity. So, is Herbert overrated? He played like ass in this game. He deserves all the blame because he needs to understand what type of game it was becoming. And putting the ball in jeopardy was a problem. Stroud made more creative plays. Stroud was not perfect. Throw for throw, charting throws. If I were charting throws in this game, I bet you Herbert had more on accuracy, on time throws than Stroud. But when you look at it from a winning perspective, Stroud made more plays in the game. He made a lot of bad throws. He made some mistakes, but he also made more plays, which is what I love about Stroud. He reminded me what I love about him in this game. Despite some inconsistencies, there were plays in this game that he knew he needed to make, and he made them. And that was the difference between the two players. It wasn't the way they threw the ball. It wasn't the timing on the throw. It wasn't the accuracy. It was, okay, this is a big play. It's that composure. So that's my takeaway from this game. I think the Texans, if they can play stellar defense against the Chiefs, they're going to have a chance. If CJ can play and take that momentum he had from this game, along with the little Joe Mixon, I wouldn't just overlook the Texans completely because the Chiefs have kind of proven to us they play a lot of close games and they don't score 30 points. So if the Texans can make that game a 23-20 game, a 20-17 game with their defense not fully healthy, but a lot healthier than the last time they played them, that's really going to help. So those are my wild card takeaways, guys. My wild card reaction. You guys let me know in the comments what you thought. Gronk spiked the like button, and we'll see you in the next video. Divisional round coming soon. Peace.